This is Nimai Delgado, one of my good friends and a very successful vegan bodybuilder. This week we've been in Tulum together celebrating a wedding, and if you're following along with my cutting series, then this is episode 3, so I thought it'd be perfect to sit down and just basically pick Nimai's mind about getting lean so we can equip ourselves with as much knowledge as possible. So don't forget to like this video. Now let's get into it.
Just start off, what's the leanest you've ever been, ever?
So I think the leanest I've ever been was 2018. This was when I was competing for the Arnold Classic. So I had started a cut probably, my cuts normally were around like 8 weeks long, just because my body always responded really quickly whenever I cut out calories.
Really fast.
Yeah. Sometimes I did 6-7 week cuts. But for the Arnold, it was my first time getting invited there, and I really wanted to be prepared. So I was like, I'm gonna do everything I can and just start this one like 4 weeks earlier. And I actually did a DEXA scan before going on stage the day before. So the day before, this was before I loaded up with carbs and everything, I was pretty depleted. The DEXA scan showed like 7.9%, which at the time, this was a bodybuilding gym where the owner of the gym had invited all of these other IFBB pros to come and get free DEXA scans and train at the gym.
Cool.
As like a promotional campaign.
Yeah.
And 7.9% was the leaderboard. So I think there was one other guy that had somewhere in like 7.2 or something like that, which to my knowledge, that was the driest and leanest I'd ever been, and actually confirmed it with a DEXA scan.
Yeah.
Before that, I don't really know. But the thing about DEXA scans that's I think is important to note is that when you do a DEXA scan, you're normally 2% higher body fat
than it shows?
Than like a bod pod or an in-body scan, which tend to be a little bit more inaccurate because the DEXA scan is able to separate your bone mass, which is normally about 5 to 7 pounds, which in all other scans, it lumps it together with lean mass. So in a regular scan, if you had 150 pounds of muscle, or 150 pounds that it's saying is muscle, take away 5 to 7 pounds, now you're talking about 145, 143 pounds of muscle, which would then increase your body fat percentage, if that makes sense.
It's not compensating for people who have thicker bone density than other people, and so can throw off.
Well, it's just lumping it together. So it's adding an additional 5 to 7 pounds of muscle, which would then lower your body fat. So on most other scans, a 7.9, or let's just say 8% body fat would be like a 6% score on other methods.
It's interesting because I think people will always assume people are leaner. Like sometimes you'll be at 13, 14%. If you have a little bit of abs, people are like, oh, you're at 8%.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so people think that when you're on stage, you're at like literally the lowest amount of body fat you could possibly be before you start having actual health issues, like 3 to 4%.
Yeah.
But
which I would argue that you probably can't even get
that's
to
what
3
I'm saying.
I think I even spoke to the doctor who was doing all these scans, and he even said he'd never seen anything lower than 5. And
like even at that high competitive level,
the highest level,
Olympias and
he
stuff.
said the lowest he had seen was like maybe a 6 point something, which was like extremely low, on borderline like unhealthy. So these people that are saying that they're 3% body fat, or maybe if they're using an in-body scan, which is like the impedance measurement, those things are wildly inaccurate and depend on how much water you had that day, whether or not you went to the bathroom, your hydration levels, your electrolyte balance. There's a lot of things that are at play there. So if you see somebody saying that they're 3% body fat online, like you're not.
It's a good point. I mean, it can help change your like mental goals that like realistically you're not going to get that bod pod or that DEXA to say 5%. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
Do you think that you would ever get that lean again?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think I could.
Do you think you will, or is it not really in your like?
It's not really a goal of mine. At that point, I think I was 183 pounds on that scan. And 7.9% body fat, and I felt like there was no way I could get leaner.
I mean, you were lean. Super lean.
I don't think I could have gotten any leaner, so I wouldn't really say that I don't know, that's my like probably my best that I'll ever do, because at that point I was competing, so I had a lot more reason to get that lean. Now I just like to lift, I like to eat, I have a lot more balance in my life, so I like to stay around, I hover around 10%, and this is like 10% on on a DEXA.
Right.
Because I've been doing DEXAs for the last year just to see my progress. And if anybody out there has access to a DEXA scan, highly, highly recommend it. It's one of the best ways you can get a baseline of understanding what your body fat is, how much muscle you actually have, and where your muscle is distributed, whether it's your trunk, whether it's your arms, your legs.
Yeah, your asymmetries come out too.
Exactly.
It's really nice.
Yeah, so you can compensate if you have asymmetries or if you have overcompensations. You can then adjust your training to do more isolateral movements to really close the gap if you have any imbalances, which is fairly easy to do once you start doing isolateral movements.
Yeah, more data the better. I was just talking to Marshall Fent about this, and he was like, "You haven't done a DEXA scan, and you're doing this series where you're."
Yeah, dude, you should totally do it.
I'm going to.
As soon as possible.
He convinced me.
Yeah, and they're only like you can find a place that's like $40-$50 for a scan. Some places are more expensive and they do packages, but in LA they have a place that does it for $45 per scan.
So this is me saying I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
He's going to hold me to it.
Yeah.
All right, so I want to come back to that, but let's move forward for a second. The thing I really want to ask is just like, maybe if someone's watching right now and they've got some good muscle mass, but they want to lean it up, they want to see the definition and start seeing the shape of that muscle that they've earned. Maybe what are some like base rules or some good basic tips that you would give somebody who's about to start cutting that would help them out?
So first thing I would say is establish your baseline. So first things first, understand where you are right now. That way you can track and measure week by week how quickly or not quickly you're making progress. That way you can make adjustments. It's just about training smarter. So for example, if you do a DEXA scan and you're at 15% body fat, a healthy weight loss goal would be around like 1 to 2 pounds per week, depending on how much body fat you have. So let's say you're at 15%, your goal is to get down to 10% body fat. That means you have to lose 5% body fat. So you can back calculate how many pounds of fat that is. And then if you have a 1 to 2 pound weight loss rate target per week, then you can know by 5-6 weeks from now, I'll be at 10% if everything goes smoothly.
Right.
So that's step number one. Second thing I would say is establish what your caloric needs are. This is also part of the basics of just making things easier for yourself. So establishing what your daily maintenance needs are, just for your everyday life based off your activity levels. There's a couple calculators out there that can do that really easily for you.
I mean, I think it's total daily energy expenditure calculator on Google. Will pull up a couple good sites for that.
Yeah, so for me personally, I like to be in like a 300 calorie deficit because I am relatively lean, so I can take a little bit more of a conservative deficit compared to somebody who might have quite a bit of extra body fat. You might want to do a larger deficit, but there is a inflection point where if your deficit is too large, then you might start sacrificing muscle mass, which is also why it's so important to track or get a DEXA scan, because if you are under eating and overtraining, what happens is you can slow down your metabolism, and then your body will start to be more conservative with what energy it's using whenever you're in these high calorie deficits. So it can actually be more detrimental because you can lose muscle mass. So I've seen this plenty of times with clients where they fall into the trap of, I'm just going to do more cardio, I'm going to eat less, I'm going to starve myself. And what happens is they almost exclusively lose muscle mass, which sucks because technically if you did another scan and you lost more muscle mass and your fat mass stayed the same, you're technically fatter than what you were whenever you first started.
It's regression.
Yeah.
Terrible.
Yeah. Because you weigh less, but it's all coming from muscle, which is, as you all know, it's really hard to put on muscle. So.
Well, sometimes you feel like that's better. Doing more cardio is better because you're doing more to progress. But actually, a lot of times, you're blasting your cortisol levels up really high, especially when you get to that I'm doing 2 hours a day because I want to be in that low zone, but I want to do it forever.
Yeah.
And so then you can tax your body, and then your lifts don't go as well. So there's some fine tuning that you can do where calories in, calories out is a great base to think about, but the details do help and matter.
Yeah. And again, tracking is like such I'm a data guy, former engineer, so I like just having trends and having the data to support whatever approach I'm doing, because your body changes too. So out of all the shows, I think I did 12 shows. Every single time I had to change. Like there was some different element, whether it was like a lifestyle change or like stress levels, or just I had more mass, so my calorie targets were slightly different, and I had to compensate for that. So what you did last year, 2 years ago,
Yep.
or what somebody else did, and you're trying to imitate, it doesn't mean that it's going to work for you. So finding out what works for you and adjusting and just logging everything makes that process much more easier.
Yeah, and it's nice to kind of learn more about yourself, because you can use that, what happened last time, and start there, but then you just, you learn a little bit more about yourself this time and adjust.
Yeah.
Now that so like how long have you been lifting total? I know it's kind of
So I'll say 17. So I'm 33 now, so 16 years.
Okay.
Yeah. So 17, I stepped into the gym, and then I really started training like around 21, 22.
Like very seriously.
Like, yeah, I started when I
with
say
intention.
Yeah, when I say started training, I mean I went with a plan, and then I started to actually look at my nutrition, which is like a huge part of training. So like before then, I was just going in there and aimlessly lifting weights, doing the whole just biceps and bench press. That was it.
Which is fun.
Yeah, it was fun. You know.
So you have so much more knowledge now than you did when you started. Like obviously, everyone learns a lot. I'm curious if you can think of something. I can give you an example if you want to think for a second. But now that you've done, so many different cuts, and you've learned a lot more about what works, what was a waste of time, what you could have just avoided completely. Maybe like what's something or a couple of things that if you knew back when you started, it would change how you would have approached leaning up,
Yeah. First one would be supplements, because I think that's the place where most people go to right away. They're like, oh, I'm going to buy a fat burner. Yeah. They're like, they think that some pill is going to really do all the work for them, and that's completely false. I mean, fat burners are very, very ineffective. And if anything, if you were to think of like the things that you should be focusing on, if it were like a triangle, supplementation should be like the very, very tip of the triangle. If you're not eating properly, like nutrition is your base, then training, and then sleeping, like those are the three areas that you need to really be focusing on, because that'll give you the most results. If you, for example, you train an hour, 2 hours a day max maybe, and you're outside of the gym another 23, 22 hours. So what are you doing outside of the gym that's really helping you recover, optimizing your sleep, which is when you really build muscle. You break down muscle in the gym, but you build it when you're sleeping and recovering. So finding out ways how to maximize that, which is looking into your nutrition. So rather than buying the next supplement, just be more intentional with what you're consuming, and then also making sure you get great quality sleep, staying hydrated, taking your multivitamins. These are all like the base foundational things that are going to compound and get you the most results. Because supplements, I mean, they're cool. Some of them work, but a lot of them are just garbage, and you're just going to waste your money and piss them all out.
Expensive pee.
Yeah, expensive pee. That's what a lot of them are. So don't waste your time on fat burners.
Yeah. I said this in the last episode. If you guys are just jumping in now and you haven't started the actual series, you should definitely watch episode 1 and 2, because I cover this while I'm actually doing it, which is pretty cool. But yeah, no, I mean, I agree with all that stuff. Like there's some base supplements that are great and just like have tons of scientific data, obviously like creatine, stuff like that I think is great for everybody.
Yeah.
But when you get down to fat burners, or like specific, like, oh, I'm taking tons of taurine and that's going to change everything, but then you're also not staying on top of your diet. It's
all just a waste of time.
Right.
So if you were to focus on anything, just focus on just basic nutrition. So finding out what your calories are, making sure you hit those calorie targets consistently throughout the week. That's going to do way more for you than if you were to buy a fat burner and try to like burn a couple extra calories through that. So
my example was going to be sleep, for sure.
Sleep, yeah.
Because the Huberman, I'm sure Huberman, he had an episode where he's saying that even having just a little blinking light on an alarm clock in your room and having that light hit your eyeballs in the middle of the night when you like wake up to pee or whatever, that can screw up your rhythm and start having you release like adrenaline and dopamine for the morning.
Yeah.
And so then it makes it harder to drop back into deep REM cycle sleep.
Yeah.
And so like for me, I mean, sleep has always been important, but it's been hammered in even harder with the scientific data that it is absolutely necessary, and there's ways to optimize it.
Yeah.
And I feel like optimizing it was like a great way to increase your progress.
Such a great way. I have a Whoop, so I'm not sponsored by them or anything. I just use it because it's great information because it tracks your sleep, and it gamifies improving my sleep for me, which before I didn't know. I had a suspicion that my sleep was not great. And then once I started tracking it, it wasn't as bad as what I thought it was, but I was able to improve it significantly by just tracking it and making slight adjustments in what time I went to sleep, what was on in my room when I went to sleep, the temperature and everything. And you can just see how much deeper or more restorative sleep you get, which is like when you really start to release testosterone and start to grow and feel well rested so that you can train the next day with more intensity and lift more volume, which ultimately leads to more mass. So sleep is a big one, because if you go to the gym and you're like, okay, I'm gonna like do one more rep, like that one more rep might get you like 0.001% more improvement. But if you were to just get 30 more minutes of quality deep REMs or like restorative sleep, then you might get a 10% improvement. So it's just being smart about what you're doing outside of the gym, because you can only do so much in the gym.
Right. Yeah. So like the theme of this video is the more data, the better.
Yeah.
I want to go back to when we were talking about you being at your leanest.
Yeah.
Kind of two questions. Like, I know a lot of people have talked about this before, but when you're at your leanest, one, how did you feel? And two, do you think it would be sustainable to stay that lean?
You could. How did I feel? I felt okay. For me, when I was cutting for shows, it never felt too difficult because I would eat the same meals more or less than what I normally eat. I would just be more intentional with the portion sizes and being very, very accurate with like my targets. And I felt fine, but definitely felt a little bit weaker, not in the sense that I would wake up feeling weak, but more so in the gym because I didn't have as many calories and I was cutting, so I was losing some muscle mass, which is inevitable if you're on like a cut for so long.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would lift a little less, which it's whatever to me. But as far as it being sustainable, you could, but I wouldn't want to.
Yeah.
Like whenever you train for a show, and it's like landing a plane. It's like, here's your target runway, and the further out you start, the smoother the approach will be. But the closer you get, if you try to drop weight and get ready for a show or drop 10% body fat really quickly, it's going to be like a crash landing. So I like to just have a really soft, sustainable approach. That way I feel great in the process, because you could do the crash landing approach, but you're going to crash in other ways, and it's not sustainable. So finding ways to make it easier for yourself, so you could start doing a cut like earlier. So having a longer cut, having a smaller deficit is going to kind of make you feel like more acclimated than if you were to just try to remove 1,000 calories from your diet and then ramp up your cardio by 45 minutes every day. You're just not going to feel great. You're going to get burnt out really quickly.
Yeah, and some people can kind of get away with that more than other people, but most people, if you do like that crash, you're gonna feel it in like your lifts and it's all around. You're gonna feel terrible.
Yeah.
So
and staying that low in body fat, like you do drop testosterone too, because like your body fat gets so low to where like your libido goes down. You can end up in a depression because you're just like you can feel less motivated because you have less calories. You might not be sleeping as good as you were in the past. So there's a lot of things that compound when you get down to like a single digit body fat that you wouldn't really want to sustain it for too long, because it would just burn you out. And then what happens is you tend to have like an opposite side of the pendulum swing. So afterwards you just binge and you go the opposite way and then put on a bunch of
I've been there.
Yeah, a bunch of fat, because you're also like kind of like your metabolism is slowing down as well. So whatever you eat, you tend to store a little bit easier.
I mean, kind of my point, but I'm sure people are already getting it, but it's not really sustainable to be your best looking at all times and always be lean.
No.
And would you say that like 8% is probably not as comfortable for you to stay at throughout the year than like maybe where you are right now?
No, I'm probably like 12% right now with a DEXA, and this is like really easy for me to maintain. I have a great balance of what I eat when I train. I'm pretty active throughout the day, so it's fair. It doesn't feel like I'm following any kind of program. If somebody were to follow me around with a camera, you might think that I'm on a program, but it's just because I've created these habits and eating patterns and just training patterns. It just feels very natural for me.
Yeah.
But it's taken me a long time to get here.
Yes.
Yeah, I've been doing this, like I said, for 16 years, and like for the last 7-8 years, a lot more intentionally, to where now it just feels like this is just my lifestyle. I don't feel like I'm following any kind of program.
Right. Yeah, I think this is pretty good so far. Now I want to do something just kind of fun. You can answer this as long as you want, but I just kind of want to do it like a lightning round. Just
Okay.
hit you with like short questions and
Let's
see.
do it.
But if you want to give a lot of detail on any of these, plenty welcome to. All right, so quick fire round starting now. Fasted cardio or not fasted cardio?
Not fasted.
High reps or low reps?
Both.
HIIT, so high intensity interval training, or sustained state cardio?
Low intensity or sustained state.
Yeah, fat burners.
Absolutely not.
Least amount of days that you can get away with working out in the gym to still get results?
I think 3.
Yeah.
If you do push-pull legs 3 days a week, even, I think I read a study somewhere too that you only need to train at 30% of your, what's it called? Like 30% of your training volume to sustain your existing muscle mass. So you're not going to grow, but if you just keep that stimuli on it at 30%, which would be like even less than a deload, just going to the gym for 3 days a week is going to preserve a lot more muscle than if you were to just not go at all and do anything.
It is crazy how long you can sustain your muscle, even without workouts, for like a good portion of time, where you think you're losing muscle the week after you stop lifting.
Yeah, and I actually had a guy on my, and this is going to be a longer answer. I had a doctor on my podcast a couple of years back that works at a fasting clinic. So this is True North Health facility somewhere in California, where they do like 30-day monitored water fast, where they do blood panels and all the other stuff, and help people lose a significant amount of weight or reduce maybe some chronic symptoms for like diabetes or high blood pressure and things like that. And he said that if you were to just lay down on your bed and not do any kind of like physical activity that produces like oxidative stress, like even walking around or training, if you were to just lay down and not do anything, your body would preferentially use fat for energy. So you pretty much exclusively lose fat. But the moment you start moving and using muscles to do things, then you produce an oxidative stress that will start to cannibalize muscle. So if you are fasting and walking around, then you're at a higher risk of losing muscle. So it's just something to consider.
So we should just lay in bed and watch Netflix?
Yeah, so it's like you don't lose muscle it's just from not eating. Like you would preferentially lose fat, but nobody's going to do that. So nobody's just going to sit around and
Maybe after this episode they might.
Maybe, yeah.
Now you just start feeling really not guilty when you're just Netflix binging all day.
Yeah.
Game of Thrones is getting me shredded right now, dude.
Yeah.
Okay, a couple more on this.
Yeah.
Squats or deadlifts?
Like from what perspective? Like,
however you want to take it.
I like squats more than I like deadlifts. Yeah.
Same.
Yeah. Squats for me.
Upper or lower?
Upper.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I'll say traditionally for like the last like 12 years, or no, maybe 10 years upper, last 2 years lower. Because for the longest time I would just kind of avoid legs, like training leg day. I would do it like once every 2 weeks, or maybe sometimes once every 3 weeks. And now I really enjoy going to train legs because there's so much room for growth and room for improvement. And after you've been training for so long, you can train longer and harder, and your results just become like harder to get, like smaller and smaller. Like you have to do much more volume to get a fraction of what you used to do whenever you just started, where you could just do a little bit of volume and get these massive results. So that's what it's been like for when I train legs, so I can see the results
actually
a lot
see
quicker.
The weights going up quicker and stuff too.
So legs
lower.
lower.
Yeah, it cycles for me. Sometimes I'm loving legs, sometimes I'm hating legs.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah,
it goes back and forth.
Okay, last one. Favorite cardio type?
Longboarding.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Not traditional.
No.
Not the Stairmaster.
No, it's also asymmetrical too, so I'll probably do it for too long. Might create some imbalances. Like my right calf is bigger than my left calf for sure, from just my push foot. But I did learn how to ride switch. But that'd be my preferred, because it doesn't feel like I'm doing cardio. It feels like I'm outside just enjoying the sunset and, you know, just cruising. But it also, you know, if you track like my heart rate, it gets pretty high and sustained for a pretty long time. So I would much rather do that than be on a treadmill or a fucking Stairmaster.
Dude, yeah.
For an hour inside the gym.
If you can make play part of your life, then you're
Yeah.
making your lifestyle choice
Yeah.
to be healthy and do cardio without it being, I have to get on the Stairmaster for 30 minutes a day. Okay, so that's it with the lightning round. Is there anything else that you just you know, when it comes to getting up and being lean and dieting stuff, you got any other advice or tips you want to add?
I mean, one, this is maybe you've already talked about this, is that you don't have to avoid carbohydrates in order to get lean. I remember even when I was competing, sometimes if I were to break down my macro ratio, 50% of my carbs were coming from whole food carbohydrates. So things like rice, potatoes, oatmeal, granola, things that are, you know, obviously like low sugar granola, things that are less processed carbs. They have a lot of really great other benefits to them, like fiber and phytonutrients and minerals that will help you recover. So people think that you have to avoid eating those foods whenever you're cutting, but you can still have them in abundance and lose body fat at the same time. So you don't have to make your life more difficult than what it is.
Yeah, you don't have to do keto, which is
absolutely not.
really tough.
Yeah, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Other than that,
yeah, I think we covered a lot.
Yeah.
I think it was really good. Yeah, if you guys have any other questions, because I know as you're watching this, you might have been like, please hit that topic, and then we don't hit it, right? Just leave it in the comments below, and then I can get back to it, or maybe at some point we'll do like another interview like this. But yeah, yo, that's it. I feel like this is just gonna be really helpful. I haven't done a long form talk sit down video like this, and I've been wanting to get you on the channel for a long time.
Yeah.
We always just kind of don't do it because instead we're longboarding.
Yeah, I know.
So we don't sit down.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for having me on.
Yeah,
Appreciate
man.
it.
And of course, like I'm sure a lot of you guys do know Nimai, but if you don't, he has a YouTube channel that he just started uploading regularly again, and he's got an Instagram that a lot of you guys follow. I'll put all the links for all the socials in the description below. Next week, I'll be back with another episode, so make sure that you do watch episode 1 and 2, and then we can keep this cut going for another 4-5 weeks, something like that. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. Subscribe if you're not subscribed already, and we'll see you the next time.
Peace.